Welcome to Capitalize Your Finances, the podcast that's your ultimate guide to mastering personal finances and unlocking the secrets of entrepreneurship. Each week, we dive into the world of personal finance and business development and have fascinating conversations with industry experts, seasoned entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who share their insights, strategies, and stories to help you get ahead in life. Whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur looking to scale your business or someone just starting out on your financial path, this podcast is your go-to resource for inspiration and actionable insights.
Welcome back to Capitalize Your Finances. As always, I am your host, Kris Krohn, certified financial planning professional, the Cap and Capitalize. And today, this weekly's tip is debt is both a gift and a curse, and it's up to you to figure out how to balance it. You see, a lot of people fall on one end of the spectrum or the other, meaning debt is either really, really good or debt is either really, really bad. Now, the answer to both of those is yes and no. You see, debt, just like money in general, it's not black and white. It's gray, which means you have to be very nimble in the mind when it comes to understanding the balancing of debt. And so to conclude this weekly tip on debt, you need to understand the dance of what the debt is, but more importantly, what the interest rate is on that debt owed. Now that we have the weekly tip out of the way, I cannot wait to introduce to you this week's episode where we got to interview the legendary financial influencer, real estate mogul, and all-around fantastic person, Kris Krohn. We went into a ton about his real estate background, his holding company, how he's building businesses, how he values businesses, and what his plans are for the next 10 years. The guy has over 3 million followers. You are going to want to tune into this. This was a very special episode for everyone involved. So without further ado, let's get into this week's episode of Capitalize Your Finances, where we get into the nitty-gritty with Kris Krohn. I've been excited to have you on the show. We've been obviously texting back and forth, and this is really going to sprinkle in everything. We're going to be talking about investing. We're going to be talking about your business, real estate, growing a following of over 2.8 million, not that anyone's counting, and maybe even a little bit of fitness. But I first want to take things back to like when you were in college. And I think it was when you were in college, you bought your first home, and I wanted to start there. Like, what initially drew you to the world of real estate investing?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly wasn't real estate. My dad was a off-the-boat German immigrant, and I watched how hard he worked his entire life, and he told me, he said, son, whatever you do, don't own your own business. Go to college, work for somebody else. That's the golden ticket. Yeah. And of course, this is happening in Redmond, Washington, where everyone works at Microsoft. And back then in their heyday, every 10th person was a millionaire. My dad's like, geez, son, like just college. So the rhetoric was so strong, perfect grades, college, etc. And so I had plans on becoming a doctor because I knew that doctors did well. And when I got to college, I took organic chemistry, which is that's a pre-med preamble. Yeah. And I got a C in the class. And my advisor said, you're not going to make it to medical school on C's. So I retook the class with a tutor, and then I got a C minus. And I'm like, okay, I am not fit for the sciences. I don't enjoy them. I think my bedside manner as a doctor would be great, but clearly 10 years of this science stuff, I got to get out of here. Yeah. And, it was weird. I knew the kind of money that doctors made. And when I started exploring all the other degrees and options, it's like, well, you could, be a psychologist, make $70,000 a year. You could be a teacher, make $40,000 a year. And I was like, well, no one makes anywhere near as much money as a doctor, and I'm too dumb to become a doctor. So like, what are my options? And that it just hit me one day that what I was looking for would not be found inside university. No. And what made real estate come into my world was a compounding effect of my wife and I having a rocky start to our marriage. Meaning we were madly in love with each other, but my wife was very debt averse. Like her family worshiped like Dave Ramsey. And so she said, Kris, no student debt, no debt. So I got a full-time job while I'm a full-time student. And that made life really stressful. She didn't have the job. Her parents were paying for her college. My parents couldn't do that. So I had to work myself through college. And even after working full time, we still went into debt. And it just drove her bonkos. Yeah. One day, like after we've been married for 4 months, got married real young. I I came home and I found her in tears, Kris. And I was confused, like these were the heavy kind of tears, like someone died.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she said, Kris, we have tuition due in 3 weeks. And I'm like, that's bad, but why are you crying? She said, Kris, we have our rent due next Friday and we've already spent next week's paycheck. And I thought, that's also really bad, but why are you crying? And then she said, Kris, I went to go buy a week's worth of groceries and the check bounced. And I'd never experienced that before. And I was humiliated and I ran home without anything. And she literally was hungry. Our cupboards were empty. My wife was hungry. And it was in that moment that I felt like such a pathetic husband. I felt like I had failed my best friend. But I also made this decision that I'm going to do whatever it takes to not be in this situation. And within a matter of months, I found these 3 different unrelated parties that had all made over $10 million in real estate. And the first one I scared away because I went to his house in the middle of the night and was trying to beg him to teach me. And he, said no. But the other 2 let me mentor with him and learn from them. And by the time I graduated college, I had 25 properties. They were paying me 6 figures. And when all my friends that were newly graduates could go and, start their working career, I ended mine.
Yeah.
I quit my only job that I ever had and I never needed to work again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you actually jumped to a part because I knew you had 25 single family rentals by the time you graduated. Yeah. And, I don't know about you, but like, do you ever get sick and tired when people go, well, that was because back then you could have been able to do that. It's like, it's all relative,
well, the same system that I used then is the same system that I could duplicate the same thing over with today. It's the same 30-year mortgages. It's the same 3% down. Dude, all I did was buy my first house at a huge discount. Same thing anyone can do today.
Yeah.
I put a 3% down payment, bank put up the rest of the money. And then a year later, I used the equity, cashed out and put it into another house.
Yeah.
And then I used the money from the second house to buy the third house. And after I had a little track record, then, people like my father-in-law came out of the woodwork saying, hey, looks like you're not a total wash up. Like, what if I give you some of my 401k IRA money? You're kicking the trash out of it anyway with single digit pathetic returns.
Yeah.
And I started building portfolios for people. And that was $2 billion of real estate ago.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. So that was your initial strategy. And, did you think that was going to be kind of your path? Like, because at that point, especially being young, I don't care how mature someone is, when you have that feeling of success and that primal excitement, and you know what I'm talking about, it's like, oh my gosh, this is what success feels like. Most people, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And so did you ever envision getting into everything that you're in today that we'll talk about later?
No, actually, I didn't want to be successful. I just didn't want to work. And it's not because I was lazy. My dad worked me into we learned hard work. My dad bought 5 acres, I swear, just to pretend it was a farm. And every Saturday, instead of playing Mario Kart, make me work it for 10 hours. That was free labor. I was like, I kind of wonder why you conceived me. I think it might have been to have a little slave. Like that's, I added nine kids in the family, 8 brothers and sisters. And no, but serious, I was fed up actually. I was kind of, if you really want to know the real reason, I was kind of upset at my wife because when we got married, we have a traditional kind of background, right? Like my wife's like, Kris, I'm not going to work. You get the job. I'm going to make babies. I'm like, you ain't making babies for the next few years. So why don't you get a job? And she just read me my rights. And it was in that moment, I'm like, well, sucks to be me. Like I get to spend 40 years of my life doing something I hate. Cause that's what I thought work was. Yeah. And, so when I retired with real estate at 26 years old, it wasn't to be wealthy or a multimillionaire or successful. It's because I wanted life on my terms. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know what that even meant. I remember when I quit my job right after college, after buying that 25th home, I woke up that morning and I asked my wife, I said, hey, is today the day? And she said, Kris, you could have done this 2 years ago. Today's the day. And so that morning I had breakfast. I got in my, BMW convertible, drove to the office, had an empty box. I was going to, when I got to the all glass building, I got nervous. I pulled my box out. I looked at the glass building. I put my box in the car because all of a sudden I felt like everyone was staring at me because this was about to be a very weird conversation. Mm-hmm. I avoided everybody, made a beeline to my boss's office, Aaron Peterson. And I said, Aaron, now I was about to tell him that I'm done working there, but I blurted something out last minute. I said, I need a $70,000 raise. And in the back of my mind, it was just saying, if they tacked on another $70,000 on your salary, dude, you could stay here another 6 months. Yeah. But immediately as I said it, Aaron chuckled and he laughed and he's like, no, Kris, we're not going to do that. And that's when I finally realized it's over. And I started laughing and I said, thank you for the job. Thank you. I bought these 25 homes. They're taking care of me and my family. I'm free. And that day I didn't want to take anything home in that stupid box anyway. When I drove home, I started calling all my loved ones and saying, I did it. I'm retired. I'm done. I don't have to work anymore. And it was like I was breathing oxygen off of life support for the first time on my own. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's Monday morning. I can do whatever I want today, tomorrow, the day after. Like nobody owns me. And that was so important to me. And so freedom was really what motivated me more than anything. I didn't care to be known. Back then I wasn't social media famous. I was a nobody that just didn't have to work because he didn't want to, because he wanted to spend time with his wife and his brand new baby and wanted to do more meaningful things.
Yeah. Well, and I'm even thinking too, because social media for you was what, MySpace, I think? That was it.
Jeez. No, and I didn't even have that. Like, I didn't even get it. I wasn't on, right?
Yeah, okay.
Like YouTube happened like 8 or 9 years ago. This guy came up and he's like, dude, you do all these amazing talks in your seminars. Like, let me just film it and put it online. I'm like, whatever. And after he would batch record with me like 4 times a year. So all that meant was I could do all of my stuff and he'd release a video a week. And after 2 years of this, I was kind of like, man, why am I doing this? It was kind of starting to rub me wrong. And all of a sudden I had this video go viral, get millions of views. Yeah. And I calculated that I had missed out on like close to $10 million of revenue just from what I could have done with that. Yeah. And that's when I caught the bug you're talking about, because after 6 months of retirement, I thought, dude, this sucks. My life has a purpose and it's not to do nothing. And that's when I started figuring out that there's people in the world that need help and I enjoyed helping them.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting and not to go back too far to the beginning, but you mentioned your wife and that feeling of fear that she had and then patheticness. And that was your direct term. And
I felt small, dude. I felt like a pathetic man. I felt small. I felt like I'd let her down.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I had the same thing. I mean, obviously this is your interview, but I don't know if my listeners know this, but when we went, so my wife and I are at the time, I don't even think we're engaged. So she sells her home, moves into the home that we bought together. I mean, I bought it, but we're living together. And then she was in clinicals to become a nurse practitioner. And so you're not making any money. And, of course, I write the plan, all that, had money set aside. And I remember we get to, I don't know if she's going to like me telling this story, but so Steph, if you don't like this, I'm so sorry, but I love you dearly. And it's all
sorry, Steph. It's worth it, though. We need to hear it. I need this.
Yes. So we go to the car dealership and it was a used Acura RDX or RX we've been looking at for a while. And we had the cash. So, of course, she goes to buy it and she just breaks down. Now, I understand it because other than your home, your car is a large purchase. It's the second largest purchase, a lot of emotion. That was my equivalent Kris Krohn pathetic moment. And I got so mad at myself saying, wow, I want to be so successful someday that buying a car is like a chore.
Yeah. Wow. No, I feel that. I get you.
Yeah.
It's strange because that moment that broke me also made me, because I decided some awful things about myself, but I also decided never again. And a lot of people ask, like, Kris, where does motivation come from you? And it's always come from 2 core memories. One was when I almost died in the ocean trying to save my sister's life. And when I came out of the ocean that day with her, my mom thought that I had saved my sister's life. And the truth is God spared my life. It was a God moment that, that every day after I was just like, why? Like, why am I here? I'm on borrowed time. And it created this energy of like, bro, you've got this day and this day only. So if it's your last day, what are you going to do? Yeah. And I've just been living the last several thousand days like it's my last day. And, but the second one was that moment where I broke in front of my wife and I said, if today's my last day, then I'm going to do something so epic. Yeah. To create all of the abundance, all of the wealth. We're going to give back. We're going to do crazy, humanitarian work. We're not going to do the mediocre thing. We're not going to settle for anything. We're just going
Yeah.
to live it up as big as we can.
Yeah. Well, and it's really funny that, I've had two as well. And again, our names are Chris, even though they're spelled drastically differently. One was the car, and then actually last September I was in the hospital for a couple days. Um, and not to get graphic, but I'm never having sushi again. I lost half my blood. And so I
Oh,
remember that
geez.
night, the first night in the hospital, my mom and my brother are there, and we have a little one at home. She just turned 13 months.
Hmm.
And so my wife filmed a little video saying, like, Dada, come home, safe, whatever the case. And I broke down. One, I had half my blood supply, so you think some crazy stuff. But then the second part of that was I got really mad. And I said, this is never again. Like, just
Never again.
never again. And you're a fitness guy. I'm a fitness guy. We can bond over that. And ever since then, I mean, I've always worked out hard. It is it's primal now. I'm not going back to that. I won't have it. So, but in a weird way, I thank God for it, just like you do with your situation. You know, I mean, it's just and it's unfortunate that a lot of people. I don't wish that on my worst enemy. I know you don't wish that on your worst enemy, financially, fitness, personally. But I'll tell you, if you don't have some of those major moments, you're not going to become there's no way you would have become who you were today.
Yeah.
There's no way, right?
No, I'm actually every trial. Most people cave under a certain amount of failure, trial, difficulty, challenge. I'm grateful that every one of mine just became something to beat and something to overcome and something to get excited about.
Yeah. What was the closest, now that you brought that up, what's the closest that you've been to the cave? Because we've all been close to caving.
Um, I mean, I had borrowed $1 million to buy a couple hundred homes in the Midwest after 2008. And I
Okay.
was going to take this $1 million investment and turn it into $8 to $10 million. I was convinced that I was going to have this huge win, and it ended up being a disaster. I bought I bought all of these homes in the wrong states, the wrong markets, the wrong everything. We were getting eaten alive, and half of the money that I used to do this was $1 million borrowed from this Jewish Iranian. And he started calling me every day with this very upsetting, troubling voice. Mr. Krohn, I need my money. It's been 90 days. We're supposed to have it back by now. Where's my money?
Yeah.
And every day I got these menacing phone calls. And after months of this, I lost all of my peace. I felt like I was going to cave. And I was at my office, and this black tinted Suburban pulls up, and 4 Middle Eastern guys get out, Jewish Iranian looking guys get out, all with these really big assault rifle looking briefcases. And I thought, they're going to smoke me. This is it. Like, Chris, you didn't pay the dude back the $1 million, and I'm losing it. And I crawl on my knees to the edge of the door. I look all the way down the hall. And when these guys come in, I realize as I overhear them talking to the receptionist that they're there to put on the free suit fitting during the lunch hour for everyone in the office. Oh my gosh, my heart came out of it. I paid that dude his $1 million back, and I said, okay, I'm never doing that one again.
No.
That one, I had a weak mindset back then. It hadn't been cultivated yet. And man, that one almost did me in.
That is why. Well, because I was going to ask, because when I was researching some of your past for the show, 2007, for those of you that were living under a rock, that was clearly a very rough time when it came to really just investing in general. Real estate didn't really get hit hard until 2009 through 12, right? So for you, like, it doesn't seem like you were totally phased, other than the, half Jewish, half Iranian guy that almost killed you. So, it's a nice little footnote. So what other things did you do to mitigate that downturn that so many people succumb to?
Yeah. October 2008 was the month where real estate took a crash. And
Yeah.
before then, real estate was one way. And the day after that, it was different. I know because on the 17th of October, I was getting ready to close on a property with a 7% mortgage. And the bank came back that day and said, it's closing day. It's going to be 16%. And it was with Washington Mutual, the bank that I had grown up with.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I'm not signing on a 17% mortgage. And they said, well, fine, I guess you're lost. I guess we'll just have to tear up the mortgage. And I was like, they were trying to get out of it. A week later, the bank folded and they went under.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. 2008 was bad for so many people. It was beautiful for me. And part of that has to do with my real estate strategy. How I built all of that original wealth is how I've done it thousands of times since. I found a tiny little niche where I can get money to perform. In general, for example, I don't even look at a deal unless it's going to produce a 25% prospective ROI. And generally we're in the 30s, and those aren't promises or guarantees. That's just our track record on what we've been doing. And the reason why that's meaningful is because the majority of people, their concept of retirement is like a 401k and IRA, a very dated, broken concept, where the average person at the age of 65 will have $254,000 and yet be living on a salary of $85,000 a year, and they're going to run out of money in 3 years. So you spend 40 years working for 3 years of retirement with modern medicine that will keep you alive another 30 years. You do the math, it never adds up. And that's because their money is really, it's largely single digit. And so I learned that when I went into real estate and at least did a 25% ROI or more, that I would do 27 times better over 20 years than a 401k. Mm-hmm. And so that became just kind of a hallmark model of my money is the way I'm doing it. My money doubles like every other year. And, that's the intention. And so I found that I could grow and multiply my wealth in the game of real estate. So to do that, though, there's a very tiny box that real estate matches for me. I wrote my very first book that I wrote, The Straight Path to Real Estate Wealth, Kris, is all about there's 30 real estate strategies out there, and there's got to be a best one. And my mentors were all arguing. It's subjective. There's not a best one. I said, mathematically, there's a best one. Yeah. And they said, well, who do you think you are to know? And even though I did awful in OChem, I actually was really good at stats. I thought I was going to get an MBA, ended up getting an honorary MBA, but I had to take some classes for that. And one of them was statistics. And I'm like, crap, another weeder class. But out of 200 kids in the class, I aced it. I got like 113%. They graded the curve on me. Yeah. And it turns out I love math. So when my mentor said, Kris, you can't really subjectively define which is best. I said, I promise I'll write an algorithm and show you which of the 30 strategies is the best. And they said, okay, but it's going to be subjective based on what you value. I said, here's what I value. Whatever of those 30 strategies will take the least of my time, take the least of my effort, make the most money, have the least risk, work in up and down markets, and provide a service. That's what I want. So I plugged that into my algorithm, and a strategy emerged. Same strategy I'm doing today. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that if you buy homes, single family, below the median by 30% in the top markets on a 3 to 7 year holding pattern, you can produce that ROI. And so that was my thesis that got me my first 25 homes that freed me. And that's what I've done now 6,500 times since. And I'm bringing that up because when I started rolling out this model pre-2008, I had some buddies that were killing it financially that would make fun of me sometimes. Like, dude, I just bought a house for $1 million that's worth $2 million. How many of your little baby homes do you got to do to, yada, yada, yada. Well, 2008 hit, they lost all their homes. Yeah. I didn't lose mine. Yeah. No, we did great. In fact, I found that we were super resistant to fluctuations in the economy, Kris. And so, my biggers were good at 2008. If I had to go back in time, it would have been, instead of doing, 3,000 homes, I wish I'd done 30,000. Yeah. Because I made $1 billion plus for my investors instead of just 100 million.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. And we all have those, man, I wish I could have gone back, but in the return side of things, obviously what you were stating is not guaranteed. Like, that's the goal. That's a high watermark. And, as an investor, I'd like to think we all have high watermarks. We had a similar situation, and by we, I mean, really me. In 2017, I was doing research on the endowment model. And, real estate can be a part of it. It's not all of it. And as you know, being a planner, we have rules and regulations. And I remember doing the analysis on it. And my thing was, if I'm half as good as Yale's endowment strategy, I'm still producing market-like returns, right? It's no different than what you were doing. It's like, okay, let's just say that that's your watermark of 25. Even if you're off by half, I don't know anyone that would get mad at that, right? Even if you're off by 25, like you do 25% as well. You know what I mean? So good for you. Well, and so one thing that's always been interesting for me researching people like you is, you get to 2015 and Because really, you could have just kept doing this. You know, God called you to a lot more, and I understand that. But you decided to triple down on yourself. That's when you started to, if I remember correctly, you wrote more books, you started public speaking, you launched your YouTube channel. So I actually want to talk about that game plan because I don't
Yeah.
know if that's as publicly known. Like, what was the initial game plan and strategy behind your channel and your speaking?
So real estate is very, very boring for me. It's a binary ones and zeros machine. And we've gotten so good at it and so automated. I got a team of 200 experts that run it for me, buy houses every single day, and it produces its ROIs almost like clockwork. So it's a really, really great model. And I got bored, and I wasn't growing and I wasn't developing myself. And if I had to get on the stage one more time and pitch real estate as an investment vehicle, I was going to be done.
Yeah.
And so I had to reinvent myself. And I did that through getting way deeper in the personal development game. Then I started getting deeper in the business ownership game, mergers and acquisitions,
Yep.
private equity,
Yep.
and financially just been able to reinvent myself so many times that now I have a variety of so many things that I really love to talk about and connect on and help people with. But a lot of that wasn't even out of financial strategy. A lot of that was just out of me asking the simple question, like, where can I be of the greatest service? Where can I be most useful? Where do I make the biggest impact? And
Right.
I feel really grateful that social media does that. You know, we get 5 to 10 million views every single week on our social right now currently.
Right.
And what I love about that is I have a very small contingency of that will come in, like, invest in real estate with me, and they'll partner and do some of the bigger games and come out to my seminars. But the majority of those people I'll never meet. I'll never know. I'll never collect a dime. I'm just creating value. And
Yeah.
it's actually become a really important business model of mine that says, hey, for every dollar I make in business, we are creating countless dollars of benefit to other people. I know, because when I travel around the world, people come up to me and they'll, Kris, I bought 5 homes with your advice, or I followed your game plan, or I read your book, and then I did this and it motivated me. And it's like, it feels good to be a force for good for the people that are looking for, someone that they can look up to and that can give them some strategy.
Yeah. Well, and I'm so glad you said that because, man, like, even so last week, I got to interview 2 of the founders of Mind Pump, the #1 fitness podcast in the world. And they were asking me, like, hey, so what's the purpose behind your show? And I'm asking them theirs and all that. And they're a media group, so like they get it. And Adam asked me, oh, so you're doing it to get clients? I'm like, no, like, that's not it. Like, if you provide your goodwill to people, everything else follows: your revenue, clients, profit. But I think a lot of people in the influencer world, which I'm not a huge fan of that word. I don't know how you feel about it. It's just like,
Thought
it's,
leader.
yeah, I prefer thought leader. Yeah. Um, but it's one of those things where I think that's where a lot of people miss it. Like, a lot of people get into what you and I are doing because they want to be famous. Like Fahim Anwar, my buddy who was on Rogan, I think yesterday, he said it brilliantly. He said, dude, people want to be famous because they're alive. Like, that's why they're famous. And that is an empty life, man.
Yeah.
Like, if you're providing value to people and you never meet 99% of your followers or 99% of mine, and then you get a random DM like, hey, Kris, I just bought your book and I just bought 15 rentals and now I'm financially free. Thank you. That's why you do it. I just wish more people understood that. Well, how did your game plan change though? Because I would imagine your YouTube channel and your speaking engagement changed because, unlike real estate where it can get pretty boring and repetitive, with social media, you've got to constantly change things up.
We listen in the world to what people want to know about, and we ask if we have the expertise to fill in the gap. And I think my team does a good job depositing the information where organically it can be consumed the most. And the goal is simple: just help as many people as possible. And it's strange. It's become actually a core marketing strategy for just expanding, our set of companies and our expanding set of companies. And I feel very grateful for it. I've spent millions of dollars on radio and TV and a lot of other mediums, but nothing beats social because you have that benefit of just helping people. And so it's useful. I go into the office on Mondays. I work Monday, Tuesday, Thursdays. Monday, I go in and it's just a video day. And that means that my team has come prepared. I've got my director and my production manager that have teed everything up. And then it's just like, hey, we're just going to whale. And some of those days are long. And, but at the end of the day, my team has everything they need to chop it up into hundreds of a million pieces and just put it out there in the world and then just see who can we be a blessing to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so how many, and I'm actually curious, and this is just a really quick question. So how many people are on your team?
My core social media company, I think we've got like 55 or 60 employees.
Wow, that's a big group. Okay.
Yeah.
And then for like your property management companies, because I'm sure do you have your own property management company or do you
Actually, I
outsource
don't.
those?
My strategy is not to participate in any of the other revenue streams of like realtors, loan officers, title, insurance. We don't play in that arena. I did that for the first decade as in real estate, and then I learned that when I was picking up pennies along the way everywhere, I couldn't hold all of my people accountable because it was an inherent conflict of interest. So I got rid of them all and became very fiduciary that said, hey, whoever I select to work with, I am going to nail your thumbs to the ground and get everything that I want because now I bear the burden of all of these properties with all of my partners. And
Right.
what I really want is the highest ROI. So if my loans are a little cheaper, if my property management is at 6% instead of 10% because of volume, all of those things translate into a higher ROI.
Yeah. Well, and for your social media in the initial day, right? And we'll talk about modern day stuff in a moment, but what would you have done if you could have gone back and redone it? What would you have done differently with your social media strategy?
I don't even know how to answer that, Chris, because the truth is we're always evolving. We're always changing.
Yeah.
We've been doing that really from the beginning is, if you're not innovating, you're dying. And so we're constantly asking, how do we do it bigger and how do we do it better? So I don't really know. I guess maybe one regret is the first couple of years I was in it, I had this guy producing all my media and I just trusted him. And it took a couple of years before I really had a video viral. And back then we were just doing one posting a week. And for that season in that game of YouTube, for example, we would have been better off posting 3 times a week. That's when we really started taking off.
Yeah.
But that was then. That's neither here nor now. The other one, though, is biggest mistake people make in social these days is they are not platform agnostic. They fall in love with Insta or Facebook. And I'm like, if you create content once, you got to post it on everything. You got to be omnipresent.
Yeah.
If not, it's like owning a Ferrari that you like to keep in first gear. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I can introduce you to our compliance department, and then you guys can have that out, which is why we're a little constrained on some of that. But I
Uh,
hear you, man. I mean, if you're going to be in one place, you might as well be in all of them, and social media gives you that platform. Well, you know, I think a lot of people think too that when you get into the world of social media, or I would even take it a step further in just being like digitally popular, okay?
mm.
People assume that the return on investment is immediate, and that's obviously not the case. So, when did you start to see your return on investment from YouTube in your public speaking?
Mm. Never did a ton of public speaking by way of going out to other people's stages. Um, uh, Today I have my own event center, and people will just fly into me, and we'll hold events every couple months. And it's kind of a nice way of going. So there's not a ton of speaking that I'm actually doing in the world. There's a couple of things that I loathe in my industry. One is that people will get on planes and brag about how many days a year they speak, or the money they make from speaking fees. And I think that speaking fees are the worst money on the planet. And the whole idea of leaving your family and life for the excitement of getting on a plane to go speak and then come back, it can totally make you feel like hot stuff for a minute. But that minute got old a decade ago to me. So it's just not very efficient. It's like today I'm going to reach, 1 to 2 million people. Why would I get on a plane and speak to 600 people in Austin?
Right.
Doesn't
Right.
even make sense, right? So I think there's that. What was your other question about social though?
Well, mine was just more like, when did you start to see the return on investment from your
My first
YouTube?
2 years in social, we weren't making any money at all. Like it was really just just putting ourselves out there. Like today, I know how to get up and going on social in like 3 months. I can get to monetization really, really fast these days, even when someone is starting a brand new account. But it took a while to figure out those strategies of how you do that.
Yeah. Well, and do you think you know how to get up and running? Because you said 3 months. Do you think it's because of the scale that you have, the knowledge you have, the fact that like obviously the game has changed a lot since, like what makes you confident in that 3 months?
So I actually have a company. So I own several dozen companies. One of
Yeah.
them does social media for other people. And we've really just hacked the algorithm on what it takes to do it. And how do you make it convenient and how do you shoot in batches? And then what's the frequency of posting and what's the format? And all of those really, at the end of the day, allow someone to get maximum results. It's kind of funny. I took Robert Allen. He's the original OG in real estate of nothing down real estate from the 80s. Had no social media. I started an account for him and I did a social for a year and he got 30 million views. And is it because he was great or is it because I knew how to make him great? And well, that's always the trick of it is great people don't get discovered unless they have a strategy. And so
Yes.
there's a strategy to how you crush that social.
Yeah, no, it totally is. Well, so and you mentioned that obviously you are not pro speaking engagement, which I recently just discovered that, and we might talk about that off air. But because you have spoken before, so I'm just more curious, like do you remember the first speaking event that you did speak at and like what you got paid and how long it was or the
So I
topic?
actually only, for the most part, I've only ever spoken for myself.
Okay.
It's kind of like the idea of a brand new book that just came out called Time Machine. And this is my first time I'm actually having the book published by a company. Most of the other ones have all been self-published, which means that I'm in control of what it is. And when you get paid a speaking gig, whether it's 15 grand, 25 grand, or 50 grand, that's generally nothing compared to what I can do on my own. And
Mhm.
so, I don't speak for speaking fees. First time I got on stage was in front of 80 people that this insurance guy had put in a room for me. I was young. I was like 27 years old. I wore an oversized suit, I had a pencil neck, and I couldn't even shave yet. Like everything looked wrong with me in a suit. And I remember getting up on stage and I was so nervous. My dyslexia was kicking in, and I was telling the story of buying my first house, and I said there wasn't a sky in the cloud. And everyone laughed, and I couldn't figure out why they laughed because I had reversed the language and said it backwards. It was just kind of a funny first memory. And I had this amazing real estate offer that was $99, and one person bought it. And
Yeah.
the next week, I just raised it to $1,000, and then like 15 people bought it because I was undervaluing myself. So, kind of a fun game, like learning how to do that. I don't really like selling anything other than just representing what I believe in,
Right.
and that's what kind of speaking really kind of became. And so I've definitely done some speaking engagements, but usually it's not for the money. It's usually for an opportunity to network, connect,
Yeah.
create meaningful relationships, and have a voice in the world.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of funny. Uh, so you brought up the dyslexia, and what's interesting about that is, have you read the book Business Brilliance?
Hmm.
Okay, so Business Brilliance, I read this book I think it was 2 years ago, and it talks about the most successful people in the world professionally. And obviously, it's not all about the money, but for this book, right, that there's a big part of it. And I think it was, and I'm going to butcher this, but it's like 7 out of 10 multimillionaires that are like 100 million or over have some form of dyslexia, moderate to severe. And that's a blessing because these executives or owners have mastered the art of outsourcing, which is what it sounds like you have done.
I have a belief that if you want something done right, you shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And I've had that
Yeah.
from the beginning because when I was going to school full time, I was working full time, and I was doing my real estate full time and married full time, as in like I never saw my wife because I was busy with these other things. Um, I remember feeling really, really frustrated at how hard things got. A lot of anxiety, a lot of stress. And the year I quit my job, I had graduated college and I outsourced my entire company. And so I went from working probably 120 hours a week to nothing. It was
Yeah.
wild. And my dad was the one that told me as a kid growing up, this German, craftsman, master trained in Germany. I was 16 years old, and he was working with this device on the mantle of this remodel, and he said, son, because I asked him, I said, Dad, I've been answering the phones and your business can really expand. Like, you have an opportunity to say yes to way more jobs. And he just said, yeah, I can't do that. I said, why, Dad? You just need a second crew. You got one crew, double your crews, you probably double your income. And he said, no, if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. And I followed that until I was 25 years old. And then I broke because it was too much. And then from that moment on and since, it's, if you want something done right, don't do it yourself. And a lot of people want to know, they're like, Kris, like, I don't know how you speak to millions of people and you're writing all of these books and then you own all of these companies and then you have all this free time with your family. And like, how do you do all that? And I'm like, well, it's really easy. You have 24 hours a day. I have 24 hours a day. The only difference between you and me probably is that most of the things that you do that you don't like, I would never do. Like, I don't make my own food. I don't clean my house. Like, I'm driven places. I don't drive unless I'm driving for fun. If it's not fun, I'm not doing it. That's my general rule of life. Everything is about time. When I bought my first jet, it was a time machine. That's why the name of the book is Time Machine, is because when I go to the airport, I got to get there 2 hours early, go through TSA, get anal probed. Then I get on the plane. I have to wait for all the people. I land. I have to wait for everyone to get off. I have all these stupid rules. And by the way, don't bring water and wear a mask. Those are all garbage.
Yes.
And, when I got my own jet, I'm like, just calling the pilot, hey, I'm going to be there in 30 minutes. And then we drive up and the plane's ready to go. We walk on and we take off. Yeah. And, it's really about time. There's a lot of people like, oh, that jet, that must be a flex. I'm like, no, if you really want to know the flex is I have 45 more days every year with my family that you can't have when you fly public because it's very hard to go in and out in the same day. I discovered this when my buddy was doing a bare knuckles fight and he said, Kris, I'm going to take world champion. I want you to be there to see it. And I said, okay, I'll be there. Well, I was committing from Utah to fly to Atlanta, fly to Missouri. And so I left in the morning, got in at my layover, got in time for dinner, watched the show. After the show, had to overnight. The next morning, couldn't leave until I think a 1 o'clock flight, had to do the layover thing. I was gone for like 2 days. Right. And I realized if I had my jet then, that it would have been 4 p.m. Hey, let's just fly on over. We'll eat dinner on the way. We'll watch the show. We'll fly back. I'll be in my bed by 1 a.m.
Yeah.
And it was just like, I got all this time back. So no, I'm time hacking and productivity hacks. Like my world revolves around them. I'm building a 28,000 square foot addition on my house right now, which consists of everything that I do in the world that I have brought to me on this social experiment that I'm never going to leave my house. Literally, I go into my office once a week. I stay in my house and my jet takes me where I want to go in the world and everyone comes to me. And what does it do? It maximizes every possible minute of my life. Like even right now, it's Thursday. I am not in my studio in my office. I'm at my at-home studio because when this is done, I'm going to freaking go upstairs, kick it and be done.
Capitalizers, this episode is sponsored by the best-selling book, Capitalize Your Finances, the how-to framework that takes you from compoundingly clueless to monetarily magnificent. Regardless of where you're at in your financial life, whether you're just beginning to express interest and commitment to your personal finances, at the pinnacle of your career, winding down into retirement, or thinking about your legacy for future generations, this book walks you through every step of the way so you can succeed on your terms and with your own values and passions guiding you. After reading this book, you will officially have Christopher A. Panayotou, the Cap in Capitalize, in your back pocket, guiding you in detail through every step of the way so that you can take charge of your finances, not the other way around. Head on over to Amazon.com today and start capitalizing your finances to the fullest with this incredible book, Capitalize Your Finances, the how-to financial framework that takes you from compoundingly clueless to monetarily magnificent. And now, back to the episode.
Yeah. So you wanted to end your week with the best interview for last, is what you're
100%.
saying.
This is the last thing that I'm doing for my work week. It's you, Kris. We're doing this podcast.
that is fantastic, man. Well, so and take our listeners into the jet setting life. I've never flown private. I do want to fly private someday. I've always thought that'd be really, really cool. But walk us through that, right? So
it will ruin you.
Yeah. So walk our listeners through that, right? So obviously you go and you have the jet, so you don't have to talk about like financing or any of that, but you have the jet, so it's just parked at the airport, right? So do you just call your pilot and say, hey, I want to fly out tomorrow, or like how does that process work?
Fortunately in my life, there's not a ton of spontaneity that's like day of flights. Most of it, most of it can be booked 2 months in advance or a week in advance. My jet is chartered when I'm not using it, and anytime I want to use it, I just cancel the charter and then use it myself. It's stationed out of Vegas because it's more convenient, and then they fly it to Provo to pick me up. And airport is like 20 minutes from where I live. And so I think what I love the most about the jet is I've created some of the coolest memories with loved ones, family and friends. And it's a strange place for closing really big business deals. Nothing communicates abundance more than the atmosphere of a jet. And part of that, I think, is because when you're on your own jet, there's no rules, right? Like no one cares if you take off with your seatbelt on or off. No one is, reading you the third degree for not wearing a mask or what you brought on, dude. I can do anything that I want on my jet, and I mean anything. So it's a feeling of freedom. And then the other thing that I love the most about it is that most people don't know that while there's like 400 major city airports, there's 5,000 municipal airports. And that means that when I want to go somewhere, I usually can just go to where I'm going. And then I don't have to commute from like a city to wherever I'm headed. So you start adding it up and it starts becoming a wild savings of time. My Falcon 50, that jet does 600 miles an hour. It's 3 engines. And our flight team, they'll put whatever food we on it when we're going somewhere. But I can just go direct to where I'm trying to get to. And then wherever that is, FBOs, they have it's kind of cool. When you rent a vehicle, it's a hassle. You have to wait in line, and then you have to sign your life away 38 times, and they have to read you the stupid thing about pre-fueling and whether you want to use their insurance and all this garbage. In the FBO world, when you land, your SUV is right there, and they usually don't even want a signature because they know if you have a private jet, you're good for it. So you literally just hop in some stranger's brand new car, drive it wherever you want. When you come back, no one's asking you dumb questions like, did you remember to fuel it up? I'm like, that would be a waste of my life. Of course I didn't.
Yeah. Well, you are going to be jealous of what I'm going to tell you we're about to do next week. So my wife and I and our little one are flying out to Nashville for the first time.
Nice.
And, part vacation. And then we've got a number of podcasts that want me on there. And I was like, okay, good excuse. We are flying first, not our own jet. We're working on that. But the car we're renting, tinted window, white minivan.
What's up, brother, man? I hear you.
Yeah, which is basically the jet of the ground. Like, let's just call it that.
Brother, my Nexton 600 feels like a flying minivan because it's not a big fuselage, and it seats 8. And so when it's me and my wife, my 6 kids, and maybe 2 of our teachers, because they're all privately educated out of our home, it's like we feel cramped in there like a sardine. True or false?
Yes.
And it's like a flying minivan. It's hilarious, but it also gets the job done.
So I do have another story for you. Speaking of minivans, this just popped in my head. My listeners are probably going to just drop me after
Bro,
this.
I got 4 kids. I could not talk my wife out of a minivan. And until we went back to SUV, it was like, that was 4 years that I didn't appreciate.
No, but here's the thing. So 4 kids, I get it. So we're bringing our little one, and then my brother and sister-in-law have their nephew who's 2. So like that, it's a no-brainer. Okay. So 2 years into me starting my business, I'm driving around everywhere, and then my car got temporarily recalled. All right, life happens. Pick up a rental. That car gets recalled. So then I get back to the Enterprise, and as you know, you sign your life away, all that fun stuff. And this kid must have been an intern, and he is jacked up. He's like, giving me the spiel. Go pick any car in the lot. And I go, all right. So I go out there, and the only car in the lot was a blacked out, tinted window minivan with spinning rims, and I had it for 6 months.
Wow.
And I was like, dude, what? But like, what am I going to do, right? And so here I am trying to make a name for myself, like, hey, certified financial planner, blah, blah, all that fun stuff. And like, trust me with your money. And I basically look like I'm living out of this minivan, like the sketchiest looking minivan in the world. So, minivans have a soft spot in my heart. I will say though, they're the most fun thing to drive. You feel like you're driving a little tank. You know what I mean? Like you feel safe.
I was glad when we got rid of our minivan, but when we did, I started realizing, I actually get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
Make Mama Happy. That's what that one was called.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, and then if you go to any dealership and the salesman or woman comes up to you and tries closing you and your wife, and they just lean in like, well, the minivan's going to be the safest route. I mean, nail in the coffin. You're done, right? You might as well just write the check. Well, I want to transition into your in 2022. So you launched your investors club, okay, which from my understanding, it kind of acts as like a holding company, almost like Berkshire Hathaway, a little bit smaller for now. We're working on it, right? I want to talk about businesses for a moment.
Okay.
Because this is a lot more new, I think, to your listeners, because you've done real estate a lot longer, right? Based on our conversation. So I'm curious what your process is when you are analyzing a business. So where do you start when you're analyzing a company?
Well, I think before I get to analyzation, I'm grateful for deal flow. I think some of the worst investments people make are because they lack deal flow. You see, if you're interested in a high asymmetric return on a business that has a low valuation today and could be the next multi-billion-dollar thing, like that'd be great. 2014, if you had $1,000 in Tesla, it'd be worth $1.7 million today, right? Mm-hmm. If you had bought Netflix in 2013, $1,000 in today's worth over $250,000. That's a high upside, and yet most of those companies will never make it. And most people will never have the money to invest in 10 of those companies. So what people end up doing is they have a lack of deal flow, and hence they never get into the comparison of even knowing what's good and what's not because they're naive. As a financial influencer, I'll use that word, I get thousands of opportunities every year from people saying, here's my company, invest in it, buy it from me, grow it, build it, social it, something it. And because there's thousands of them, I built a team a few years back that now just vet them, go through them, and basically say, hey, we're looking for the diamond in the rough. And so, whittling down the first 1,000 is pretty easy because there's a lot of just dumb ideas out there. We all need someone to save us from our dumb ideas. I have a whole team that saves me from mine. Yeah. And then what you do is you got to figure out how to refine them. So when we go into analyzing an idea, I've got a team that will first go in and meet with the owners, vet the company, the idea, look for proof of concept. And I like to be somewhat early stage where an idea, was theorized, and then a product or service was developed, and then they started successfully marketing it and selling it. And now they are approaching profitability or are profitable, and now they're looking for scale. That for me is a company I'm looking for. If it's disruptive and doing something huge in its space, they've got most of the difficulty behind them when it comes time to scale. And I love scale. Mm-hmm. So what I look for basically are companies that have, I think, the next big idea. I usually play in the space of software because you get really high multiples.
Yeah, of course.
For everyone listening, that means when you sell your company someday, EBITDA is more or less, think of it kind of like profit, right? After taxes, insurance, et cetera, whatever. You've got this EBITDA of a 20% margin. So my company does, $10 million in gross revenue, and we produce $2 million of profits. Let's say that $2 million is the EBITDA. And in that industry, and based on that volume, I might get a multiple of 4. So we're going to take my $2 million of EBITDA, we're going to multiply it by 4. Now my company has an $8 million valuation. We may produce $10 million in revenue a year, but I can only sell it for $8 million. Once you go into software, because it's a subscription model based usually, and if you can get, you have automation for scale because now you're using tech instead of humans, you can get multiples on companies like that. Highest multiple I have on one of my companies is 47. And so now it says, for every dollar of EBITDA, I have $47 of resale value. That's insane. Yeah. So I look for a lot of software. So basically it's got to be disruptive technology. It can't be innovation. It can't be, hey, we took an idea and we made it a little better. Like, don't you know you can drive to those places where you can get rock chip repair done? We'll bring rock chip repair to you. That's innovative. It's like, no. I don't want innovation. I want disruption. Something that is going to redefine an industry. And then I want to see that their theory has turned into some level of track record. It's gone to market ideally, and it's working. And when I find a company that meets that criteria, then I ask, does it have a really strong ownership team? And do they have people on the team that have a track record of having done this before? So if I'm working with a company that has never done it before, there's a company that I just did this big negotiation on, negotiate a 40% discount on equity in the company. We're doing a 7-figure play with them, and we're giving them some smart capital. It's not just money. We're actually going to step in and provide management training and do some things to help them scale their company. But my one stipulation to the owner, I said, I need you to hire someone in the next 9 months, CEO, COO, in a prominent position that knows how to scale and has done it at least twice. And he was pushing back and he said, Kris, I'm that guy. And I said, brother, I sat in your meeting. You proved out your business. Your goal is to double it next year. Brother, you should be 10xing or 20xing your company with the money that you're getting. So you don't know scale. You're a creator. You're a founder. And usually who starts the party is not equipped to scale the company. And so I said, and we had this pushback, and I said, then I'm walking. And he said, but I want your money. I said, who wouldn't? But no. And he said, okay, I'll work with you, sit on the board, help me find that person. And then he finally got it. He said, the reason why I don't want your company to fail is because of you. I need you to love your business enough to put your ego on the side and instead say, yes, Kris, I'm going to find someone that has scaled in my industry twice before successfully. So this could be their third slam dunk run. Then I'll invest in you. Then I'll believe in you. Right. So those are some of the things that I look for when investing in a company. And the hope is after 3, 5, or 7 years that they pan out with some really huge upside.
Yeah. So in basically what I'm hearing, if I'm translating to a little bit more of the nerdy talk, right? You're not really angel investing where you're just coming out of the garage and, you're the first guy we talk to on the street that has a pulse with money. It's more like the primary or series A of private equity. Like that's kind of the wheelhouse, right?
Yeah.
Where you actually like the active ownership, but then also it's like this blend of active ownership, but you kind of sit back as a limited partner because you're really providing the capital, if I'm hearing that correctly.
Yeah. We provide capital. And then sometimes we'll literally bring them in-house into one of my, some of them that are here in Utah, we'll literally grow them here. I'll help them find their CEOs. We'll plug them into my wider company culture and give them a lot of infrastructure and support that they just don't have yet. I've got shared services in my companies for, accounting and HR and operations, COOs. And so I'll provide that as well. And all of a sudden they're saving a lot more money and they're loving the deal because we've really streamlined it, made it a lot easier for them to focus on what they need to be, which is marketing and selling and fulfilling.
Right. In software, I get it because whether it's software, service-based businesses, not a lot of expenses and capital, margins are great. Like you're not going to get margins basically anywhere else, right? Especially with the size of these companies. Now, I one thing actually, speaking of size, is there like a specific revenue size of company you like to target?
No.
No? Okay. And so, for you, so let's say you've decided on this business, okay? And this is something that I've actually been doing a lot of research on with a lot of the super investors I've interviewed, is it's one thing to say, I've got this great business.
Yeah.
But then it's another to go, okay, how much am I allocating as through my holdings? So how do you go about choosing your proper allocation amount for the business?
So we do it a little bit different with my investors club. When people come and say, hey, Kris, I'm interested in you because of what we've done in real estate together, but I hear you're doing some private equity deals beyond real estate. What does that look like? And while I'm not a financial expert, I'm not licensed, I'm not a financial advisor, the principles that I share with them are you should allocate a percentage of your money that you'll know is going into high risk. And you're looking for some private equity plays where you've got the potential for, 10x, 50x, or 100x growth. But whatever money is set aside, you got to put that into no less than 10 different opportunities. And this whole idea of no eggs in one basket is really hard for the greedy that are like, but Kris, this private equity company you just talked about, it's got to be it. It's surefire win. It's amazing. I said, you're going to allocate a 10th for that, not a 15th, not a 20th because you're excited, or a half, a 10th. And then you're going to find 9 other such things. Now, when you go to the private equity space, even on a small time level, a lot of those PPMs, they want 50,000 to 100,000 or more. Sometimes $250,000. When you get family office, $250,000, $500,000 on up. And the problem is that prices out your beginner accredited investor. You might have someone that says, hey, Kris, I bought a few homes and I've got a couple $100,000 in my 401k IRA. I want to play that game. I'm like, well, if you do it in the real world, you don't have enough deal flow. Going back to that principle, you're not going to vet enough stuff. I'm vetting thousands. You're not going to vet enough. And then whatever you do find, you're going to put your money into one or two. And so that's a problem because you're going to lose 80% of the time. So if you put your money in two places and you have an 80% lose rate, you're going to lose on both of them statistically. But if you put your money, if you can spread it into 10, and then they say, well, how can I do that if I only have a couple $100,000? And that's why I'll aggregate all of these companies into a group opportunity where now all of a sudden the investment can get spread and their money can go further. And, because it deals in securities, we don't go into more detail of what that is or how that looks. But there's a principle that I want to highlight, which is you have to be careful that you don't put all your eggs in one basket. And a lot of people, when I first started playing private equity and I had very little money, I put it all on red. And turns out that was a mistake. Remember the first time I had a really great private equity play presented, this company had created, I kid you not, like this cure for cancer, like something that exciting in that medical space. And I put all the money that I had into it. It was just, I was young and it was really dumb. And 6 months later, the key inventor and the two of the three owners in the company died in a plane crash. And it was just like, it vaporized. It was gone because all the principles died, right? So you never know what's going to happen. And that's why, but here's what's exciting about asymmetric investing. Asymmetry means that you have a downside, which is a lot smaller than your upside, right? In a symmetrical investment, the worst thing that can happen is you lose everything. The equivalent in symmetry is to gain, to double it. So I put $100,000 in something. My worst case scenario is I lose $100,000. My best case scenario is if I didn't lose 100%, I make 100%. So it becomes $200,000. That's boring. Right. With this kind of stuff, it has way higher upside, but you have to understand that you're going to lose most of the time, 70, 80%. And if you do, that's actually what winning looks like, because you only technically need one of those 10 to be a true moonshot to make you all your money back. So that's why you can't also put all your money into the strategy. It's for a small percentage that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and I'm so glad you brought this up. So whether you know this investor or not, Monish Pabrai, our listeners have heard me talk about him a ton, and we're trying to get him on the show. And he's a huge believer in the 10 by 10 method, right? So 10 holdings, 10%. And he actually did you can't go back in time, but he basically researched like, hey, if I did this with my first fund, how would I have done? Yeah. And he had these companies. I think 3 of them went to literally zero. Okay. So not good. 3 of them did like, okay. 3 of them did a little bit better than average. And then that one Lone Ranger just blew it out of the water. And it's funny because that one that blew it out of the water, the rest of them, it doesn't even matter. It is a non-traversy. Like, it is a non-issue. You don't have to be right a ton in investing. I wish people knew that,
So I teach my kids every week. So my kids are all private educated. We pulled them out of the school system years ago. We bring our teachers in, and we do a lot of world schooling and a lot of customization where we focus on their interests and their passions. I pray to God I'm not messing my children up, because we are doing it very different than what I was raised on. But we have a ton of fun. And on Tuesday mornings, I do financial education with them. And we've been talking a lot about blue chip companies and what they are and what defines them. And right now they've got their green card app where my kids can invest in publicly traded companies. And I said, okay, guys, Livia, you've got $2,000 in savings. You're a kid. You don't need an emergency fund. Mom and dad will be that for you. So if you want, you can put all $2,000 into your investment. She says, okay, Dad, well, so what should I invest in? I said, well, that money's going to be spread into 4 things. What's that, Dad? Well, I said, you've been talking about starting a little business, this little permanent jewelry thing. You're going to need about $500. So we don't know if you're going to do it yet. Leave 500 of the 2,000 aside. And then there may be, one of the categories is real estate, but right now you need your money to grow for a down payment when you are 18, 19, 20. We don't need real estate right now. So we're going to allocate nothing of the 2,000 there. Number 3 is other. There may be something else exciting that comes along and you want to have money for that. Let's do another 500. She says, well, Dad, that leaves me only 1,000 for the 4th category. What's that? I said, well, that's where we're going to do our asymmetric upside investing. And she said, well, Dad, if I only have $1,000 in that and I have to do the 10 by 10, it's only $100 per company. I said, yes, and you can do that on your green card that I just got you. I think it's called Green Light. And we've been talking about the first company. I said, well, it's weird, but normally we would never talk about investing in a blue chip company like Tesla. And my children understand that Tesla has an $860 billion valuation. For the last 2 years, they've gone hard against Boston Robotics on creating the first ever, Android that's going to be in a home. And they're so rapidly developing right now that in the year or two, they may hit production levels. Well, that robot at $15,000 for the home is something you could finance at $100 a month. And guess what happens when $100 a month gives you full time of this robot's time to cook, clean, do dishes, run errands, order, buy things, whatever you want, right? It's going to change the world. So I said to my kids, how many households in America will have one of those? And I said, I bet half. So if in 10 years, half of America owns that, what kind of company does it make? And I gave them my weird math, and I said, I think this $860 billion company could easily become a $5 to $10 trillion company. And so I said, that company, now we can measure what its upside looks like. And maybe it only is going to be a 10X, but it could be a 50X, or it could be bigger. And so Livia's like, okay, Dad, I want to put 100 of my $1,000 in that company. And I said, okay, let's do it. So we did it. And now she's like, what do I do next? I said, patiently research and look for the next 9 companies. Yes. And that's just something I'm doing with my kids, just to get them exposed to this principle of how you do it.
That is awesome. Well, and it's interesting because as our daughter, because again, she's 13 months, so we're not quite there yet. Yeah. I mean, last night she right now the big thing is we can say like what is it, like, Abby, give me a little kiss, and then she just kind of leans in and just open mouth just like hits your cheek, which that's a big win.
Yeah,
that's a big win, right? But I will definitely be calling you as she becomes of age. One of the things that I've actually talked about a lot lately is the art of the lemonade stand. And it's interesting talking to people about how they would, if they could go back, re-enlighten their children on the lemonade stand. And so is that a concept that I wasn't even going to ask this, but since you brought it up, is that a concept that you've thought about bringing up to your kids?
We've actually done it. We're doing it right now with Daniel's, my 12-year-old son's bees. $600 for a beehive. He now has 4 of them. And he can basically create $1,200 between honey and renting the bees to California in the winter, which is where they're sitting right now for the crops. And I'm like, son, you're basically on a passive investment. You're doubling your money every year. And so he says, Dad, can I get a loan from you to buy 10 more hives? And I said, well, let's talk about the payback period and the interest you're going to pay me back. But yes, we can. And so it was fun. The whole family got involved when he took his first hive, got the honey out of it, basically put it into the tiny little things and took the wax and made little, lip balms. And within 2 hours at the farmer's market in St. George, sold everything and basically made $600 on his first 6 months of just having honey. And he's like, Dad, I need more hives. And I said, well, you either need to take out a risky loan from Dad, or we're going to need you to, get your other hives and just wait a little bit, but they're going to multiply. And we did some math, and I said, son, by the time you're 18 years old, if you keep multiplying, you'll make $50,000 a year, which, by the way, the average graduate leaving college makes $50,000 a year. You'll make $50,000 a year going into college should you choose to do such a thing. So it's practical. It's like lemonade standing, man. It's practical economics for kids.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned college. So obviously you had a unique path, right? Yeah. And college is not the same that it was back in the day. Okay. What is your take on educating your kids about college?
Well, I think it starts before college, that the goal of education is to learn, to love, to learn. And so there's a lot of things that my kids aren't learning that normally they might be, like calculus and other useless things that you just aren't going to use in adult life. The next time you're going to need calculus is when your child is old enough for calculus, and then you're going to try to remember it. It's really stupid. I think our schooling system is just so wild. And so we focus on loving learning. And what that means then by the time they get to college is I'm agnostic. I'm like, if college will help your career and what you want, then go for it. And if it will be an impediment, then go for it. But the one thing that you need is to love learning throughout your entire life. I'm self-made, I'm self-taught, I'm self-learned in most ways. And I have an insane passion for learning, and I just gobble up knowledge every single day where I can get it. And that's really what I'm trying to install in my kids is just, if you love learning, you're never going to go wrong. I also have taught them that if you're an entrepreneur, you'll have a harder life at first, but you're going to have a more fulfilling and more rewarding life with more possibilities. But it's hard to get into at first. And that's why when you're young, you want to be smart with your money. You want to live on the cheap, and you want to be able to take some beats and stripes. Some people call that failure. We call that learning. And that's part of the path to great success.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's fascinating you say that too, because I wish more entrepreneurs understood the J curve, right? So you start here, you dip down, and then obviously you take off. Now, sometimes, you know, the J is a little bit deeper and a little bit longer
Sure. Yeah.
for
Yeah.
some as opposed to others, you know? I mean, if you were dyslexic, I wasn't the best student, so our J's were a lot longer than the average bear. But I I'm just going to speak for myself. I'm very thankful that I'm where I'm at today, and I wouldn't have traded it for the world. So go back to your investors club for a second. So, like, what's the end game of the investors club for you?
So really, people in my world fall into two categories. Either they want to be my real estate partner, which means, hey, can we take some equity out of our home or savings or something from a 401k or IRA? Can we self-direct that? Can we put it into real estate and earn the higher ROIs? And there's a lot of people that do that. And then there's people that once they have that, what I call a foundation for wealth, what you build on that foundation is with private equity or some of these other investments. And so I usually don't do it in the reverse order because, real estate's your solid double play. And, beyond that is your triple and quadruple digits. So I usually tell people in this order, number one is invest in real estate. After you've done that, number two is invest in a business or start buying businesses. And those are the things that we really order things in. So the goal of the Investors Club is to help someone within a year, get their money sitting in 10 different really high upside opportunities with the mindset that you can risk and lose everything. And you plan on losing most of it. But if we can get one or two or three of these to really go somewhere, it's going to be positive.
Yeah. Well, and I will say, and I don't know if you're privy to this, but in the world, like in our world, we have opportunities on our doorstep, daily. And most of them, I just tell them to kick rocks. But it's fascinating because the world of private equity is becoming a lot more accessible to everyday people, which I think there's a gift and a curse with that because it's taken so long for most people to understand the risk, the reward, and the ideas of what I'd say is a traditional investment, like a stock or a bond. And so the gift is for private equity, it's offered to a lot more people now. But then the curse with that is you've now got to relearn the whole idea of correlating your assets and understanding how to truly value a business. And so, I don't know. I don't know about you. I think we're probably 20 years away from that becoming a more mainstream thing. Maybe a little bit sooner. But I hope that these non-accessible investments become more readily accessible as time goes on. And I'm seeing that. And I think you're seeing that too. I one thing I wanted to ask is you've accomplished so much. And it may seem like it's been a long time, but really, in the grand scheme of things, it's been a short period of time. And I, you asked me when we first got to know each other, like, what are my plans for the next 10 years? And as you know from my text, I answered you to the nth degree. I wanted to save this question for you on the show. So, whether it's in business, personal finance, real estate, or even fitness, what is Kris Krohn looking at for the next 10 years?
So over the next decade, I would love to have ownership in 10,000 companies. Right now, we're doing a lot of strategic acquisitions, consult for equities. And right now, I'm focusing on building a machine, a deep learning machine that allows me to acquire a lot of companies. And so, from a financial perspective, the next decade is going to be filled with expanding that portfolio massively. I want to do something that's never been done before in having ownership in that many different companies. And really, that's because a decade from now, I'd like to be the entrepreneur's economist. I'd love to be the number one go-to in the world that can really teach and train on business and finance and how to succeed in the current economy. But on a personal level, it's really just more of a spiritual journey with my wife and my family. I really have a deep passion for meditation, for spiritual matters. And so, that my life is split hard between business and the sacred. And that's why I really love and enjoying just spending time. It's strange. In business, I have a chance to impact so many different people. But I'm part of a number of masterminds where, as a thought leader, there's a lot of thoughts and ideas I get to share that really help further society along. But a lot of those thoughts they range from the personal development space to deep spirituality. And over the next decade, I see myself participating very heavy in both those.
That is awesome. Now, before we get into the rapid fire questions, before we close this out, because I want you to spend time with your family. Obviously, that's way more important than talking to a guy like me. But unrelated, because aren't you getting ready for a bodybuilding show?
Yeah, this fall, I'll have my 4th bodybuilding show. Right now, I am, in this moment, the heaviest I've ever been on planet Earth. I'm 6'3.5" and 254.6 pounds. And I'm on my way to 265. And then I'm going to cut down and probably step on stage around 230, 235 at maybe like a 3% body fat. And pumped about that one.
You should. You should be. Yeah, I miss competing tremendously. And obviously I'm in a different stage of my life with the little one. And if we're trying to, have more, that is not a recipe for success with bodybuilding.
It's true.
But I will say kudos to you, because that cut, it's going to be tough. Like anyone that has never done bodybuilding, it is a foreign concept.
The first cut is the deepest, but it does get easier with time.
Yes, it does get easier with time, but it's still, I've only competed 3 times and I want to wait for a while. The first time I had no idea what I was doing. And then the second time my coach came in, it was 14 weeks. And I went from like 196 to 162. Yeah. And that was tough. And then the third one, it's easier. But then it's like, okay, I'm ready. Like this burger is torture. Yeah. Right. So no, I think that's awesome though, man. And I just had to ask. Now, rapid fire questions. What is the best business advice you can give our listeners?
The most dangerous information is what you don't know. The second most dangerous information is what you think you know.
That is beautiful. And one of my favorite questions, what are some of the best pieces of advice you can give our listeners when it comes to capitalizing on their finances?
Wealth is built from moving money from low to high yields. And if you can find a way to mitigate risk while pumping up your yields, that's ultimately what will determine whether you make money or not. People get stuck in strategy. They get stuck in, well, is it real estate or business, or is it this or that strategy? I'm like, Stop thinking about the categories and start thinking about the ROIs. Have you intelligently diversified your ROIs to produce the outcome? Because you can run the math on a future value calculator and know what that is, and most will never do that. It's my biggest criticism I have with most financial planners, to be honest, is that they focus on what someone should do with their money today and tomorrow, but not necessarily whether the choice will yield the outcome when they need it to yield an outcome. And that's really just a math of ROI. And so if you know where you want to land, you got to look at that ROI and say, shoot, I have to find a way to get a third of my money earning me 20%. If I can't, I'm going to fall short of my goal. And so I think a really smart financial plan includes doing the math and knowing whether it will land you where you want.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that. I mean, it's kind of a plug for my book, but I'm not going to plug my book. So, but your book, Kris, before we ask where listeners can go and best support and follow you, talk to us about Time Machine. It comes out in March, literally any day now.
It comes out any day. Yep. It's okay. Named Time Machine. It's coming out in March. This is my 5th book. It'll be a bestseller again. This book is all about how to make decisions in life. The summation of all your results in every aspect of your life will come down to 2 words: yes and no. Most people will make those decisions based on time or money, and it's a fallacy. There are a total of 5 different factors that you need to use to judge your decisions by. And this book is designed to help you understand what those are so that you can make choices that you love all along the way. That book is found on Amazon. But I have another gift book that is available now that I am giving away. It's freewealthgift.com. And I've got a famous copy of my real estate book that you can pick up for free. I've got 2 free tickets to my next live event. I even have a free consultation if you want to learn more about who we are and what we do. Free wealth gift those where you can access that book and some other cool resources that are designed to help further where you're at in life.
Awesome, man. And last but not least, where can our listeners go to best support and follow the Kris Krohn?
It's just Kris Krohn. Just spell it right, Kris Krohn. Yeah, you'll find me on every single platform except for Snapchat.
Okay. Well, Kris, thank you so much for coming on. And to all of you that listen in, as always, thank you for tuning in and keep capitalizing. If you have questions about today's episode or any personal finance questions, please reach out to me at Cap and Capitalize on Instagram, Kris at capitalizeyourfinances.com, or via our website, capitalizepodcast.com. If you want more Capitalize Your Finances content, head on over to capitalizepodcast.com and check out our blog, free resources, book, and online course. As always, I'm your host, Kris Krohn, certified financial planning professional, the Cap and Capitalize. And until next time, keep capitalizing.
The information provided should not be considered specific tax, legal, or investment advice and is not specific to any individual's personal circumstances. Different types of investments and/or investment strategies involve varying levels of risk, and there can be no assurance that any specific investment or investment strategy will be profitable for a client's or prospective client's portfolio. Thus, investments may result in a loss of principal. You should always seek counsel of the appropriate advisor prior to making any investment decision. All investments are subject to risk, including the loss of principal. This material should not be considered a solicitation of an offer to sell or buy any specific security or offering. Investors should consult a financial professional to determine whether risks associated with an investment in the shares are compatible with their investment objectives. IRA withdrawals will be taxed at ordinary income rates. Withdrawals prior to age 59.5 may also be subject to a 10% penalty tax. Examples cited are hypothetical, are for illustrative purposes only, are not guaranteed, and subject to potential federal and state law amendments. There is no guarantee that you will achieve the results discussed or illustrated. It is important to keep in mind that investments in fixed income products are subject to liquidity, interest rate, financial, inflation risks, and special tax liabilities. Interest may be subject to the alternative minimum tax. Diversification strategies do not ensure a profit and cannot protect against losses in a declining market. Christopher Paniotto is a registered representative with and securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, and member FINRA SIPC. The investment professionals are affiliated with LPL Financial and are conducting business using the name Capitalize Your Finances, a separate entity from LPL Financial. Kris Krohn and any other individual or company mentioned in this podcast are not affiliated with Capitalize Your Finances or LPL Financial.